Good day, and welcome to today's webinar, Performance Engineering Solution Overview. Today's webinar is brought to you by Vivit's Performance Engineering Special Interest Group leaders, Todd Decapia, Todd Decapia, Paul Shovlin, and Chris Trimper. I am your host today, Paul Shovlin. I am a Florida Vivit co-chapter leader, over 20 years software quality experience, 11 of those years with Checkpoint Technologies. I am active in Vivit in the local Tampa Quality Assurance Institute user group. I reside in Clearwater, Florida, and I spend much of my time chasing my kids around. They keep me busy, that's for sure. And our speaker today is Todd Decapia. Todd is Chief Technology Evangelist at CSC Global. He has a passion with purpose in all walks of life. He's a leader and founder of several Vivit worldwide chapters, special interest groups, and webinars, dad, wildlife conservationist, and outdoor sports enthusiast. Technical and business expertise and recognized domain authority in mobile, agile, DevOps, performance engineering, and Internet of Things. Some housekeeping. Today's live session is intended for all Vivit members. The recording will be posted in the webinar section on the Vivit website, visible for all members. Additionally, today's slide deck and webinar recording will be made available to you. We will send you the link via email once they are posted to the Vivit website. To enlarge the presentation pane on your screen, just click on the rectangle in the upper right-hand corner of the presentation pane being pointed to by the red arrow. If you have questions as we go along, please type and send them in using Q&A pane on the left side of your screen. Simply type in your question and then click on the Ask button. To ask a question and receive them in your native language, click on the flag in the upper left corner of your screen, which will launch a language selector box. Next, click on the radio button next to your language and then click on Apply and you're all set. All right, let's get started. Our agenda today, introduction. We're going to talk about performance engineering process foundations, solutions. We'll have some time for Q&A. And of course, as always, a thank you. So Todd, tell us, why are we here today?
Well, Paul, I'm glad you asked. So I think when I look at the performance engineering community, I think there's been an increased amount of information and education around what is performance engineering, and even a little bit more about how people might go about adopting some of these capabilities. But one of the big challenges that I know a number of people that I've worked with at a number of different customer locations, as well as here at CSC Global as well, what are the different solutions that I need to think about? Because, I've got a limited amount of time, limited amount of resources, limited amount of budget. I just can't go out and buy all of these different tools that I'm required to be able to start bringing performance engineering into my organization. So that's a lot of why are we here, Paul. And what we're going to frame out today is looking at your stack and then going ahead and identifying what does that look like from not only an introductory perspective, but also some foundational components to think about, as well as a variety of different solutions that are out there today. And then we wanted to open it up for some Q&A. Throughout this discussion that we're going to be doing today, there are also going to be a handful of polls that not only will help us to shape the conversation a little bit, but also be interesting results, I think, for the overall group today to see how some of their peers may or may not be doing a variety of things within performance engineering. So I guess with that, Paul, we'll move to the next slide, and we will go ahead and launch our first poll. So what you will see in this poll question is, looking for a very easy yes or no answer to a question, which is, are you working to implement performance engineering capabilities but struggling to understand with all the different products and solutions that are out in the market today? So I guess, Paul, when we see that we've got enough responses, let's go ahead and close this one out.
Sure.
How would you look at that? So from the results that we've got in, it's actually split 50-50 with 5 yeses and 5 nos. So again, good information to have, but it's kind of interesting that it's an immediate split between the two. I guess, Paul, what would have you expected to see in those results around, people having this struggle with understanding with all these various products and solutions out there and performance engineering?
Yeah, from my experience, I would actually expected more yeses. There's so many solutions floating out there, and there's always the question of not only do they implement, but how do we best implement them? What's the best way to use these tools? Especially monitoring tools. You have so many different monitoring tools that do different things well. There's a lot you can do there, and from my experience, I've found that most organizations aren't clear on how to best do these things. So I actually would have expected more yeses than what we got.
I would agree. So as we keep moving, again, I want to get quickly into a introduction, and the idea here is really introducing this concept, getting into a little bit more of the why. And I'm going to ask this not with my performance engineering hat on, but more of, have you ever wanted to do something? But have you had a direction? And I think as a leader, many a times this is, maybe you have team members come up and they've got an idea of, hey, we want to do something, or we've got an idea, a direction that we want to go. And then especially if it's, leveraging certain tools. And unfortunately, I think we all get caught into the technology paradigm here and thinking about software or hardware tools. But, I also enjoy doing some home projects as well, as I know you do as well, Paul. So again, thinking about all these various tools in maybe a variety of different contexts, you need to start thinking about, how do I put this vision together? And knowing that you might have some limitations. Specifically 3 that I've called out here are time, money, and effort. And again, I think it's important that we think about this not only from a performance engineering perspective, but maybe some other examples, and we've mentioned a few of these already. The other question that I often enjoy asking, though, is, how do you do it today? And specifically around performance engineering. So if we were just to look at the practices of performance engineering, how do you do it today? Could start with something as simple as performance testing, could even back it up a bit further and looking at something like non-functional requirements, or even if we start maybe towards the end, like Paul had suggested, in something around monitoring. How is it that you already do these things today? So rather than trying to recreate the wheel or set a huge vision in front of a team with a direction that may be huge and where you may bump into some more of those challenges around time, money, or effort, let's look at how do you already do some of these things today. So, how do you deliver effective performance engineering to your organization? Again, these become these broader questions that we need to start to answer. I will give you some resources that will also help you answer some of these questions, but I'm sure some of these you've already figured out. Some of these you've already solved for. Is this easy? So is performance engineering easy? Are you able to deliver these types of results? How did you get buy-in, or how do you get buy-in? Again, every organization is a little bit different, even depending on the department that you're working within or across. buy-in is going to come in a number of different ways. What is the overall vision? So again, where is it that you want to start? Who are those key stakeholders that you have to support this, ultimately to be able to deliver that value fairly quickly to your business? And then where do you start? So sometimes it's, how do you start? But now we're talking about where do you start? Paul, did you have a comment?
No?
Okay. So next, we'll move on to our next slide. Which, Paul, I thought you might ask me a question.
So, Todd, where do we start?
Awesome. Well, before we start, I'd like to actually pose this as a polling question. And this one's really going to be around, do you have a foundational Sdlc that you leverage throughout your organization? And again, I'm going to keep all of these poll questions very simple to make it easy for you to provide a very quick response. But as you would think through those various questions that we just walked through, how do you deliver effective performance engineering to your organization? Is that something that's easy to do? How do you get buy-in? What is the vision? Where do you start? There are many, many more. We will begin to quickly see why this very seemingly simple question of, do you have a foundational Sdlc that you leverage throughout your organization becomes very critical. So hopefully everybody's had enough time to pick a very quick yes or no to this polling question. And here are our results. So we have 8 as yes and 3 as no. I guess, Paul, what of what you've seen, what would you expected in those results?
Well, the results for me are on target. I think most places have a foundation process that they follow. Whether or not it's effective is another question, but I believe most places have something in place, or at least they think they have something in place.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that? Yeah.
I would. The challenge, and I think we'll dive into a bit more of that here coming up very quickly, is, what is that foundational? How broadly is that adopted across, various groups, business units? Is it an enterprise, model that's being leveraged? And then more importantly is, once you have that foundation, what are those pieces that are being built on top? So as an example, as we start to dive into the foundation piece, you can see this is actually an illustration taken from a book that I had the opportunity to co-author with Shane Evans this year. And you'll see the website there, effectiveperformanceengineering.com. Encourage you to go out. You can get a free electronic copy in 4 different formats. But what's important in this illustration, and you can see this is figure 3-1, is thinking about that foundation, that Sdlc, and again, in that polling question, what we were really going after was this idea of, do you have a foundational Sdlc that you leverage throughout your organization? What does that look like? So again, this is kind of what I view as that starting point. And as we continue to go through, we're going to look at a variety of what these may or may not look like. Again, varies by your department, your business unit, your enterprise, et cetera. I would hope that as these roll up to that enterprise view, that we can have some similar foundation. Again, this being a very simple waterfall foundation model, and requirements through maintenance, I think we're all very familiar with what these model looks like. This being a model from version 1 that helps to represent that of agile development and what might that model look like. As we continue to think about some other models, this becomes what's widely been accepted as a DevOps model. So again, models are going to evolve, so do some of the capabilities, but I think what we're going to see from this conversation around performance engineering solution overview is we need to start with some sort of foundational model and then build out some of those capabilities around those as we look to adopt more and more of these capabilities throughout our organizations. So, and again, I don't know if this is a new model to many. Seems like sometimes when I show it to people, it's the first time they're seeing it. The idea is you've got this continuous assessment kind of going on around everything, and then there's this integration and testing, delivery and deployment, and then continuous operations in the middle. I think once you get a quick look at it, very easily do you start to understand how this becomes that DevOps piece. This is what becomes kind of a hybrid model. So again, it sounds like the majority of people already have something, but again, if you were looking for a model to kind of move towards what might that look like, this is what, one model is you could adopt. Paul, I know you're going to ask the question. I mean, is there a standard? The answer is no. And I really hope we never get to the point where there is, hey, this is the standard model that we should all follow. And again, the objective that I'm coming to in this conversation gets to, let's get the foundation, and then let's talk about what that overlay or that layer looks like, because your organization has already acquired a number of tools, a number of capabilities that you can leverage. You just need to kind of look at what that overlay looks like. So again, there is no standard today, but that will be defined within your organization. Got another poll. So when thinking about performance engineering, do you have defined enterprise standards? So again, we just talked about a model. We talked about, is there a standard that's defined for those models? Well, how about for performance engineering? And again, I know some of the folks that are on the webinar with us today, they've had the opportunity to go through this and do this at their enterprises, starting typically in one business unit, and then as they become more defined, you end up with these enterprise standards around performance engineering, and that's where you can start to leverage a lot, especially it becomes related to different metrics and measurements across the variety of systems and infrastructures. But that's when it becomes quite interesting. So in this question, Paul, I don't know if you're starting to see a majority of responses coming through.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and close it out.
All right, so the results here are 4 for yes and 8 for no. So I guess, Paul, what are your thoughts around what you've seen in a variety of organizations?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Having performance engineering, it can be segmented across different organizations within the organization, within the different groups. So that having more no's, twice as many no's than yeses, doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I would agree. So as we keep moving through here, I know, Paul, you're probably wondering, Todd, what are these solutions? You keep talking about them. So
you're reading my mind, Todd.
I know. There's
scaring me. Stop it.
There's a lot of different solutions that we could dive into. Unfortunately, I think most people immediately go to tools, and what does that kind of look like? So again, as we think about a foundation around an SDLC, as we then talk about this performance engineering and some defined enterprise standards, immediately I want to go to, we probably already have some of these assets, but and that's what this poll is going to be around is, have you mapped tools to your foundation SDLC? So given that half of the people already had this foundation SDLC, I'm interested to see, have those folks mapped their tools to that foundation SDLC? So now when you think about performance engineering, when you think about the capabilities, when you start to look at, now looking through these different pieces of that foundation, where is it that we have these practices? Where is it that we have everything? So we can go ahead and launch that poll. So again, a very simple yes, no here. If you just take a few seconds and click on the one that is relevant for you, just looking to get a general sense of where people are. Again, have you mapped tools to your foundation Sdlc? And next, I promise, we will be starting to go into solutions. But like I started, I think, the main objective here is, the challenge that I've had is when people want to migrate and move to performance engineering, it really becomes, how do we do it, leveraging what we have and knowing there are some very real constraints that we all face in the world. So we've got 8 as no, 5 as yes. Again, Paul, do you have any thoughts or ideas on what you would have expected in those responses?
I would have expected more no's, and I think doing this is a brilliant idea. Just to give visibility to everyone with the organization as to here are our tools and here's where we use them. I think that could be very helpful to everyone. I think it's a great idea to go ahead and do for everyone to really take this back to their work and do this.
Cool. So again, as we get into solutions, I don't want to forget this idea of having some sort of foundational piece, whatever that Sdlc is that you follow. Maybe there's, again, every organization is going to call it something different. But let's not forget, we have to have that base foundation. And then as I think about, how is it that we're going to lay these different pieces on top, that becomes layers. And I will show you very specifically my thoughts in that area. But, we had mentioned that hybrid model, or again, if you were looking to leverage something, these are those rooms that I see within the foundation. So again, I know that all of us can get excited and argue bits and bytes, but let's just think about this. If there's requirements, there's architecture design, there's test plans, code, test and test results, and then some feedback from the field. So again, we can map a lot of these to different phases through whatever life cycle you're following. As we move a little bit further down on the stack, this is where I start to think about some very specific functional bits. And, I'm going to first cover, I will only cover kind of the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise piece. These are probably the bits that most of our participants are familiar with. But, as you think about things like requirements management, this is where ALM and Agile Manager come into play. There's other tools that are also out there that maybe you already have in your organization. So things like Caliber RM from Micro Focus, or the IBM Rational Doors product. It's funny, I'm just thinking back. It's been many years since I've used that product. Jira from Atlassian is another product that we've gone ahead and looked at in some organizations. And then, of course, CA had acquired Rally ALM, which they're now calling Agile Central. So, as we think about that requirements and those use cases, again, around that space, you can start to see this is where ALM and Agile Manager, as well as some of those other tools that I just mentioned, come into play. And again, all of this around performance engineering. As we get into things like, architecture, design, and test plans, you can see things like Lean FT. Many people have not been exposed to what Lean FT is, how it works. Almost think of this as a headless functional testing tool, which your developers can access within their IDEs. So again, now you're enabling developers to be able to write these scenarios all within there as well. So again, there's other tools that come to mind. I wanted to touch off on Lean FT to go ahead and give a little bit more color to those specifics. There's other tools that could be mentioned. So things like Jenkins, things like Bamboo, Microsoft Team Foundation Server, Puppet, Team City. I mean, these are all things that you're probably familiar and hearing about. And as you think about architecture and design, as you think about development, continuous integration, these are other tools that will come into play as well. As we get into test plans, you can see I've mentioned two tools here, Quality Center and ALM, as well as Octane. So again, all of this falling into the test plans, the test management. Maybe you've heard of things like Rational Quality Manager from IBM, Zephyr, as well as several other products. Some of the ones we've already mentioned, things like Jira, would also come into play here. Further to the right, again, all of these becoming this, more HPE-like or HPE-centric model. So again, maybe you're working in an organization that already has a majority of those HPE tools. This is what that build out could look like for you, or that layer over top of that foundation. So again, test and test results, load runner for your performance, things like Fortify for your security testing, Lean FT or UFT for more of your functional. But again, all this is to do is to provide a visual. And as you think about these various rooms within that foundation, you can very quickly start to map to these. And now you're having a conversation thinking about those limitations that we've already talked about, time, money, resources, or effort. And, okay, so I do already have these pieces. Some of the feedback from the field elements, things like SiteScope, BSM, other real-time monitoring and reporting that you might have access to would absolutely fall into here as well. So again, this kind of, it's all a practice of, what does this solution overview start to look like as it would relate to performance engineering? How is it that you can work with your stakeholders to answer some of those difficult questions that we started with? How do you get this adopted fairly quickly? Now, as you would imagine, and one of the things that I am looking forward to is, now that we've introduced this concept of a foundation, we've introduced these various rooms, we've introduced some of these challenges, and we've outlined some of the solutions. The one I just showed was kind of that HPE layer, but as you would imagine, we could also introduce an IBM layer, a CA layer, Micro Focus layer, and more. So this is a piece that I would love to collaborate with more people on. And again, these are just the ones that are more focused on those few different vendors. You're also going to have a variety of hybrid ones. But what is it within this performance engineering community that as we look at a variety of different solutions and the value that they're bringing into our organizations, what is it that's important? What is it that's working? And, how can we start to share other things? I know that, Paul, as you and I have spent more and more time together, we've also spent a lot of time talking about automated performance testing. And again, this would fall kind of in that test and test result space. But you had mentioned some of the other tools like Performance Center, Micro Focus, their Borland tool sets as well. Some of the RPT or Rational Performance Tester. Are there other ones that as you and I look at this solution overview that we would want to call out? Again, helping people to understand this idea of having a foundation, having a variety of different layers to make it more easy for them to start answering some of those questions that we initially posed, like, how do you get started? Being able to create that direction, the vision, delivering effective performance engineering and gaining that buy-in and exactly where to start. Are there, I guess, Paul, are there other pieces in this equation that you would want to highlight on this slide around that performance engineering solution overview?
Yeah, I would say, because a lot more people are going to Agile, people, a lot of folks use tools such as Atlassian. Where can we fit Jira in here? There's also like Zephyr, some Agile-specific tools, and can you integrate them with the other solutions such as CA, HPE, IBM? And for the most part, the answer is yes. I know at the Department of Veterans Affairs, where I spend most of my time, we have a mix of HP, and we have some CA tools. We have Performance Center Load Runner, SiteScope. For monitoring, we have SiteScope, which we use more to look at the health of the system, the machine, and looking at the CPU memory. But then we also have CA APM, where we're looking more at the transaction level. We're looking at possibly bringing HP diagnostics in does a lot of similar things as the APM, but the integration with performance centers there. But we also utilize CA service virtualization because we don't, as most of the folks on the line here know, it's difficult to have a fully functioning enterprise test environment to do performance engineering end-to-end testing, and we need to come up with ways to help simulate that, and virtualization tools have really helped us out. And yeah, that CA tools something that's worked well for us. But yeah, I think a lot is around the Agile now. How do we do this with Agile and integrating with that, Atlassian tools as well as other tools? HP has Agile Manager, CA has Agile Central, used to be Rally. Is that what you're looking for, Todd, or anything you'd like to add to that? I know I just spewed out a bunch of different things and I was all over the place.
Well, it's great because I think, Paul, and I know you and I hadn't rehearsed that part, but the idea is what you are presenting, and again, from the perspective of your customer at the Department of Veteran Affairs, is there is a real mix from a variety of different vendors that your customer, your client, is leveraging today to be able to deliver performance testing and maybe even starting to want to adopt some more of the performance engineering capability. So, your one example, I think, is very representative of probably all of the people and individuals that are participating in this webinar, and probably even more so, many of the organizations that are starting to think, how do I adopt these? How do I use them? How do I integrate them? And again, I come from more agile, as far as the practices I like to employ within my teams. But I think, whether it's, waterfall, agile, hybrid, call it what you like. Again, starting with some sort of foundation, something as simple as what we're looking at right here with these rooms is imperative. And then mapping, some of the tools that you already have. Maybe you start to find the duplication of tools. There's an operational expense cost savings, that you can go after immediately. But I liked how you talked about service virtualization. Again, being able to build out, more of that environment to be able to do more testing earlier, or not having to pay for that performance or QA-sized environment from your vendor, and using something like service virtualization to do that. I know early on you mentioned, integrating, differentiated tools together. I know a lot of the vendors have started to publish free integrations. So things like, going from a performance center to Jenkins, again, that integration being freely available that you could leverage within your team today. Also, I've heavily leveraged sites like GitHub and SourceForge to go out and search for those integrations that may be an open source project that I could either contribute to and or leverage. So, Paul, I think your example, even being unrehearsed, is representative of the challenge and the problem that I've seen for so many years in the market. And, in trying to do any type of change, create any type of vision, can be rather challenging initially, especially under many of the resource, cost, and effort constraints that we all live under today. So I Thank you, and I think your insight was spot on. So I know with that, I'm going to kind of transition a bit more because this is one webinar of 12, 11 that we've done already this year. 12, and we've got a 13th one coming up here quickly. But this whole series that we've run throughout the year here in 2016 is really something that has helped, I think, as an organization, Vivid, being able to get the word out and really sharing more, even broadly beyond this independent HPE software community, but really reaching across all vendors and going out and talking about something of performance engineering. So, Paul, I don't know if there's any here that you would want to highlight or any other points that you would want to make on this slide.
Yeah, I would like to add to that where between the webinar attendees and online views of our webinars, we've had over 1,000 members attend or watch our 2016 webinar. So it's something we as SIG leaders are very excited about. So please continue to help us get the word out and share our special interest group with our colleagues. As we stated before, our slides, recordings, and blogs are available online. In all the previous meetings are available online, and we have one left this calendar year, December 13th, Performance Engineering Core Capabilities. So, hey, Discover 2016 London, you may only have a week, but there's still time to register. Here's the link here, hpe.com/discover. Never too late.
And if you guys are going to be there, I'm actually wheels up on Black Friday, so I will be there for the weekend. And if you guys are looking for someone to hang out with, I always enjoy London, know the city well, and be glad to show anybody around as well. So you could reach out. Maybe on Twitter would be easiest to try to reach me. There you go.
Tour guide included. There are many great reasons to attend Discover if you've never attended one before. There's so many that we have a top 10 listing. I'm not going to go through all 10 reasons so we can get to our questions. Some highlights include the transformation zone where you can interact with all the different experts and peers. It's another area where you can see the future, what's coming tomorrow. You can sign the NDA and see what's in the plans for HPE. I enjoy seeing all the different roadmaps for the different solutions, and especially networking with not only HPE folks but partner companies, peers. It's just always a great time, and it's always great to get away from the office and have these sort of experiences and time for learning and networking. And our very own Todd has 2 sessions planned for Discover. 4 key focus areas for effective performance engineering. And Todd, what is your other session? Sorry, I don't have that in front of me. I believe you have 2. Is that correct?
I do. Yeah. The second session is actually going to be, so the first session is that one, the 4 key areas of effective performance engineering. If you're planning on going to Discover, would love to see you there. I'm planning on bringing about 25 copies of my book with me. I'm going to be highlighting a few of those elements from the book in this session. The second one is the 3 unspoken truths to know about security for 2017. This is a Vivid roundtable discussion, and I am really looking forward to bringing this one to market with you guys, and would love to continue the conversation here. As many of you know, I used to be employed by Hewlett Packard Enterprise as the Chief Technology Evangelist in software. I've now moved into my new role as this Senior Director of Technology and Product Innovation for a company called CSC, which is Corporation Service Company. And I'm going to be touching on a few of the elements that, again, as I think about performance engineering and security, there's a very interesting correlation there that many of us will know, and some people love it, some people hate it. But again, in this second session, there's the link out there to sign up for both of these sessions, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I will probably end up, as long as Vivit lets me do it, I'd love to record that session after the event so that we could also start to share some of these unspoken truths that you guys really should know about security for 2017. There's some items out there that have really opened my eyes over the last 3 months, and these are really big deal items that, again, I just want to make sure everybody's aware and some of the things that they can be doing today proactively to mitigate the risks that they're going to have in the coming year.
Okay, great. Sounds great. Wish I could be there this year, but unfortunately, we'll not be able to hop over the pond with you. But yeah, it sounds great. All right. Well, hey, let's get into some questions. All right. Let's see. Okay, here we go. How does Foundations work with the different SDLCs, Agile, waterfall, hybrid, etc.?
Right. So I'm assuming this question probably came in a little bit halfway through, but I'm not going to belabor the point. I think what is important is being able to tee this up in a way with your organization, with your stakeholders, that you think about that fundamental foundation or framework, whatever that looks like, and then just simply being able to overlay those tools, the practices that you already have in place to be able to start to build out. And you will quickly find what some of those gaps are, and hopefully they're small enough that as you're on your path to implementing and adopting these performance engineering capabilities to get you to that overall solution is a very minimal amount of effort or costs associated. So again, the foundations, working with Agile, waterfall, hybrid, it's not a dependency. I would suggest that foundation should be rather independent. May look a little bit different here and there, and what some of the tools are that you would want to leverage and some of the practices required. But start with a base layer foundation, and maybe that's just within your department or just within your business unit, then being able to show that value and have it be something you could champion more so at an enterprise level.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted you to repeat all that again first, Todd. Thank you. See, what are tools like LoadRunner? Is this performance engineering?
Sure. So straight away, I would suggest that LoadRunner would be more of a tactical tool focused on load testing. So, how many virtual users, what type of response time are we seeing? Again, it becomes a component of the broader performance engineering solution. But if you were just looking specifically at LoadRunner, again, that would be more of a performance testing focus.
Okay, great. Where and how does monitoring play a role?
Interesting. So monitoring, and I think you suggested this early on, Paul, is something that's typically thought about more towards the end. And again, whether it's Agile, whether it's waterfall or a hybrid model, many times that's where people start. I think as a performance engineering practice, monitoring is something that becomes adopted throughout your foundation. So again, at a very early stage, first thinking about it from a non-functional requirements perspective, or maybe even security. What type of monitoring are we doing around security? How are we doing that at a build environment? So again, the first time we're putting these applications together, the first time we're running some automation, what type of monitoring are we also running to be able to get results and feedback at that very early stage? Again, all of these become performance engineering capabilities that we would want to adopt throughout. So again, monitoring, that's where it plays a role. It's throughout your entire foundation.
Okay, great. We had talked about this. I don't know if you have any to add. Are there other vendors or solutions for performance engineering?
Absolutely. So I think this becomes, part of the reason for this entire conversation is the challenge that many people are facing around, okay, I get it, right? I need to move from performance testing to performance engineering, and here is why. I have a little bit on how I can start to do that, but at an enterprise level, I have a challenge of being able to get that visual together to have a vision to drive towards together as a team. And right now, resources, costs, effort, these are all big limitations right now that I have. So yeah, there are other vendors, there are other solutions. I know I highlighted the HPE one to start with, mentioned some of the other vendors that are out there. So, you've got HPE, you've got CA, you've got IBM, you've got, Tricentis is another one I probably haven't mentioned, Parasoft being another one, Neotis being another one, Dynatrace is probably one that comes up a lot. But again, there are a lot of other vendors and a lot of other solutions, but as you can see, is all of these are playing an incremental role in that overall vision, which hopefully is driving towards your vision of implementing performance engineering.
Okay, great. You talked about mapping tools to your foundation, Sdlc. Are there any best practices with doing that? Is it a visual diagram? Any ways that you recommend an organization do that?
So what I would start with is the slide that we had shared where we spoke about rooms. So this could be very easily, take this exact slide, project it up onto a whiteboard, and then sit there with your team and just simply write on the whiteboard under each one of those rooms, what are the different tools and capabilities? So again, it's tools, it's practices, right? It's everything rolled into one. Where do each of those fall within each one of these rooms? Again, under the idea of performance engineering. So, I guess very explicitly I can show the slide that I'm thinking, which would be this one here. So again, just take this, project it up onto a whiteboard, onto a piece of paper, whatever you've got, print it out, and then just sit with your team and start writing in, what are those tools that we already have, integrated or not, but they're in our environment and we could start to leverage them across all of these different pieces. Again, taking that foundation, building on top of it, and then as you suggested, Paul, mapping the tools into this model.
Okay, great. Thank you, Todd. Yeah, folks, last call on questions. I don't see that we have any more. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up if there are no other questions. So I'd like to thank you everybody for attending today's webinar. Thank you, Todd. That was a great presentation, great insight, much appreciated. Just a reminder that the webinar recording and slide deck will be posted to the Vivint website, and in the next few days you will receive an email with those links. And when we close out, we have a survey. We ask that everybody please go ahead and submit the survey for our own feedback, and it always helps us to improve our future webinars. So thank you, everybody, and have a great Thanksgiving week for those of you celebrating Thanksgiving. Take care. Thank you.